Released in 2013, Naughty Dog's The Last of Us is considered by many to be one of the finest examples of storytelling in a video game. Since its release, there have been plenty of articles and videos put out discussing why the game's story is so powerful, but few of these actually examine how Naughty Dog achieved the emotional weight necessary to drive the story home. So that's what we are going to take a look at today. I'm William, and let's take a look at how specific choices made by Naughty Dog in the opening sequence of The Last of Us work to maximize the emotional impact of Sarah's death and the introduction of Ellie. To begin, let's take a look at the game's opening cinematic to see how Naughty Dog is able to foster an immediate connection between the player and the characters.
Tommy, listen to me. He is the contractor. He's the contractor, okay? I can't lose this job. I understand. Let's talk about this in the morning, okay? We'll talk about it in the morning. All right, good night.
Hey.
Scoot.
Monday at work, huh?
What are you still doing up? It's late.
Oh, crud, what time is it?
It's way past your bedtime.
But it's still today.
Honey, please not right now. I do not have the energy for this.
Here,
What's this?
your birthday? You kept complaining about your broken watch. So I figured, you know. You like it?
Honey, it's
What?
nice, but I think it's stuck. It's not.
What? No. Oh, ha ha.
Where did you get the money for this?
Drugs. I sell hardcore drugs.
Oh, good. You started helping out with the mortgage then.
Yeah, you wish.
Good night, baby girl.
The reason this opening cinematic works so well is because instead of focusing on forms of exposition such as backstory or setting, it focuses on providing context for Joel and Sarah's relationship as father and daughter. Sarah is going to die in about 10 minutes, and if that death is to have any emotional impact on the player, well, the player has to be made to care about Sarah. And the way that Naughty Dog does this is by pushing the backstory aside till later. Later in the game, we learn about Joel's life before, but now's not the time for that. Right now is the time to see Joel and Sarah interact, to see the banter between them, to see that he is clearly a good father and that he and Sarah have a good relationship, the kind of relationship that makes her want to stay up late on his birthday so that way she can give him a present when he gets home from work. Having the opening cutscene focus on Joel and Sarah's relationship helps to provide emotional context, so to speak, for the player. By seeing Joel and Sarah's relationship, the player is able to understand exactly what Joel has lost when Sarah dies. And as such, the player is more able to empathize with Joel. And this empathy is enhanced even more by the playable segment after the car crash. Years ago, when the game first came out, one of my friends asked the question as to why there was a playable segment at all, why it wasn't just one long cutscene. And the obvious answer, of course, is that Naughty Dog didn't want the player to get bored, but also on a narrative level, the playable segment is important because it makes the player responsible for Sarah's safety in the same way that Joel is responsible for Sarah's safety. If you screw up during this playable segment, Sarah can die. You, as the player, have to get her out of the town safely. And even though her death at the hands of the army is scripted, your subconscious still feels somehow responsible, much in the same way that Joel feels responsible, even though there's not much he could have done to prevent her death. This sense of responsibility will go on to become one of the primary motivations for the player and, more importantly, Joel throughout the rest of the game. It's this parallel between the player's motivation and Joel's motivation that allows his character arc to work. Joel spends the first half of the game essentially trying to run from his responsibility. He resents having Ellie forced upon him. He doesn't want to have to take care of her. Why? Because he's afraid. Last time he was responsible for someone, they died, and he doesn't want to have to go through that again. And because we too felt responsible for Sarah's death, we understand where he's coming from, even though we as the player are more eager to accept Ellie than him. It is this parallel between Joel and the player that gives the rest of the game its emotional weight. For example, let's look at the cutscene after Ellie runs away from Tommy's place.
What are you so afraid of? That I'm gonna end up like Sam? I can't get infected. I can take care of myself.
How many close calls have we had?
Well, we seem to be doing all right so far.
And now you'll be doing even better with Tommy.
Not her, you know.
What?
Maria told me about Sarah.
Ellie?
You are treading on some mighty thin ice here.
I'm sorry about your daughter, Joel. But I have lost people too.
You have no idea what loss is.
Everyone I have cared for has either died or left me. Everyone fucking except for you. So don't tell me that I would be safer with someone else, because the truth is I would just be more scared.
You're right. You're not my daughter. And I sure as hell ain't your dad. And we are going our separate ways.
That cutscene only works because of how well crafted the opening to the game is. If the game had begun without the prologue, then Joel's reaction to Ellie in this cutscene would seem mean-spirited and unwarranted. But because of the prologue and how well crafted it was at making us empathize with Joel, we can understand where he's coming from, even if we don't necessarily condone his reaction. And the game, in a way, always banks on that opening having elicited an emotional reaction in the player. The game is essentially Joel's redemption story. The game opens with him carrying his daughter through the streets and her dying. But the game ends with Joel carrying Ellie out of a hospital and saving her life. And just as the game tells a story of Joel's redemption, it tells the story of us as the player. We couldn't save Sarah, but we could save Ellie. And it is through these parallels that The Last of Us was able to tell a story that was uniquely emotionally engaging. If there's one thing that you take away from the video, I think it should be this. if you're telling a story, the first thing you should focus on is the emotional aspect of your characters. Your characters can have a backstory. There can be a interesting setting, but you have an entire story to introduce those things. You only have a few short minutes at the beginning to make your audience care about the characters. So do what you can to make those minutes count. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, leave a comment letting us know. And if you didn't like the video, please definitely leave a comment. We're just starting out on this, so we'd like to know what we can do to make these more enjoyable or any ways that you think we could improve. If you'd like to see more of these, go ahead and click the subscribe button. We're going to be releasing video essays every other Friday. Our next one will be focusing on BoJack Horseman and how the characters in it are active participants in advancing the plot rather than passive, and how that can lead to more dynamic storytelling. I'm William. You've been watching Those Narrative Guys. I'll see you next time.